One more thing.
Yo, what's going on? It's One More Thing. What do you know about Egebamyasi? Besides being a mad sounding word, it's also the title of an album by a German experimental band in the 70s called Can. It's also the name of a Scottish acid house pioneer. Now, I've got to claim complete ignorance here. I hadn't heard of him up until last year, and I'm really gutted that I hadn't, really, to be honest. Big up Ben Wilmot for enlightening me. But Egebamyasi was on it since the mid-80s. In 2024, he celebrated 40 years of being involved in music. I'm really glad I've heard of him now. It's kind of proof that the dance music world and universe is so vast that you can still have new discoveries from the past, even after devoting like 20 years, 25 years of your career to it and your whole life in your headspace. And I think that's beauty in itself. But what's really amazing is Eggy's story, aka Jim, or Mr. Egg. Everything, like even from the first email that I had from him, there's egg references. He really is, that is his brand. It's also, I think, well, I'll let the interview explain where it kind of came from. The interview starts with eggs, it ends with eggs, and it's got a whole load of history in between. Essentially, we explore how on earth a 303 ended up in Motherwell when not that many of them were made in the mid-80s, and how it ended up in his hands. Meanwhile, in Chicago, DJ Pierre is famously kind of stumbling on the hack that the 303 gave all of dance music. Acid is the spine of every genre. It's in there or can be incorporated in any aspect of dance music. It is, in one way, it is electronic dance music in its purest kind of most venomous form. So I chat a lot about this with Egebamyasi. We talk about a lot of other things. We talk about how he accidentally was making wubs in the mid-80s, although their context was completely different then. We talk about how things have changed, certain aspects of things that haven't changed. We talk about his new explorations into dubstep, his label with Foxtrot called Foxbam Inc, and a forthcoming remix of his of Blue Monday, which is dropping later on, or a little earlier on in this year. It's basically landing in the spring sometime. We talk about a lot of different things. The conversation, as it should be with a man with 40 years tenure and tales to tell. It's an extensive long-form chat, and so it should be. I was really, really, really inspired by this. There's lots of really interesting things, including like sessions, a long-lost session with a guy called Gerald, which has lost the tape for. All sorts of interesting stories about different raves, the machinery, and his thoughts on where we're at now as well. As dance music is a very, very, very different beast in 2026. This interview was done a couple of months ago, just before Christmas, like November last year. As is my usual fashion, I'm really, really late with getting it out and long. The interview is long, but it's very interesting and it's very informative. If you are already aware of Egebamyasi, then you'll already know this, and please just skip this waffle and just get into the interview. But I wouldn't skip it now because I'm going to stop waffling now. This is Egebamyasi on One More Thing with me, Dave Colombo Jenkins.
One more thing.
So, how about eggs? Tell me about your relationship with eggs.
Well, we were all eggs once.
Yeah.
Right? So you can't get away from that. Just that I've carried on being one. When I had hair, I got the head shaved in about 84, and the kind of the egg thing, like eggshell blonde, is more going back to when it started. But I was given a wee decorated painted egg by somebody back in 84, and that's how all the egg collecting started.
Right.
It just grew from there, and it just kind of like got really out of hand. There wasn't any particular idea of music and eggs. It just rolled, and it just grew, and I just kind of went with it and just played with it, and it's still growing. It's still going, and it's still rolling.
Yeah. For some reason, I got caught up on this saying that my partner really likes. I think it's a relative of ours, like, and when they've had a really satisfying meal, they say, "I'm as full as an egg." And my missus has always really liked that saying. And when I've been thinking a lot about eggs, preparing for this conversation and looking forward to talking to you. Have you ever heard that saying? And do you like that? Are you filled? I didn't know if it had any relevance to any of this besides the egg
No,
connotation.
I've never heard that egg
I think it's a
phrase.
Welsh thing. I think it's a Welsh saying.
Well, the Welsh are all right. I quite like the Welsh.
Yeah, I'm Welsh. I'm
Either,
talking to you from the valleys.
are you? What, you in Wales now?
Yeah. I'm Welsh. Very, very terminally Welsh. Like I know I don't
Yeah.
sound it particularly, but yeah, no, I am extremely Welsh.
Well, I'm extremely Scottish.
Yeah, I know, and that's beautiful. Like we're,
Celtic brothers.
yeah, definitely. And I think, like for me, it's always been important throughout my entire career of documenting dance music, of telling it from a Welsh person's perspective, telling it from someone who grew up in Cardiff in a smaller region, not in London or Bristol or Manchester or any of these kind of, cities that are celebrated for their contributions
Mm.
to acid house culture and underground culture. This was all happening all around the country. And a lot of smaller places like Cardiff or Swansea or the valleys, where lots of free parties were going off, and it would have been the same up in Stirling for you, and all around the country. These things were happening, but they weren't quite as well documented. Or it was more like a kind of, it felt like something really special because we're out on the fringes. We're not part of the bigger cities, but it was still happening at the same time. So I'm interested in your perspective as a pioneer who is there from the start, but doing so in a more regional area, in a more local area, not in a big city.
Well, basically, there was nothing happening in Stirling like that in '84. Um, and as I say, I never. It was all turned out to be an accident. But, Stirling was a bit of backwater. I mean, even there wouldn't have been much like that happening in Edinburgh or Glasgow at that time either. I think Scotland would have been just not on anybody's radar even back then. So there was just and I kind of it wasn't even like there wasn't no even a scene then. There was no dance scene. There was no like collective electronic collective. It was just I didn't have a clue what was happening elsewhere. Never read any magazines. Completely missed all the kind of acid smiley thing in '88. Knew nothing about really any stuff like that because I
Mm,
never read any like magazines or papers. It wasn't until like later on that was what the fuck. I mean, so all this was going on. I never knew anything about it because basically it says Stirling was a backwater, Scotland was potentially a slightly bigger backwater, and it really wasn't until probably nearer like the '90s that it kind of more or less exploded. But the late '80s was just a musical build up to the '90s.
yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but still, not really knowing, being naive because I never knew. Just got said I was a bass guitarist and just kind of fell out of love with the bass. Found the bass line and just things changed. Just different ideas. And but as I say, it was all a learning curve. It wasn't a. I hadn't let stop playing the bass and think, no, I'm going to do something really different and unique. It just that was just the way things went from stopping playing the bass.
Yeah, the
No,
natural kind of path of things in that way. And it's something I was really interested in knowing because you had a 303 back in these early times, long before kind of acid came about. And I wondered if you, because the whole acid sound, like kind of famously, the story is that DJ Pierre in Chicago had kind of found that acid sound on a 303, and that it was a kind of a happy accident that it wasn't supposed to. The 303 was never meant to make that sound. It was supposed to be an electronic bass player, really, wasn't it?
aye.
I believe. Did you, because you were experimenting with the 303 around this time and you were unaware of acid, but you were playing with it, did you come across those sounds as well? Just incomplete on your own curiosity, your own experimentation with the machine? Did you have similar kind of sounds or results in the way that, the famous acid kind of story has gone in that type of way?
Um, there was experimenting like with the machine, but I mean, I never looked at the machine as a substitute for like a bass player. I mean, it was just the kind of a new, fresh sound that I heard from this machine, and because I'd played the bass. I mean, whether I'd played the bass or no, I might have still like enjoyed the machine. But a lot of the bass lines that I can remember like doing with the stuff back then weren't quite as what you might call classic, like fucked up, disjointed, acidy tunes. I was using a lot more like 16 note patterns, like were kind of quite fast. For what I can remember, because most of I mean, I knew nothing about writing the bass lines. The amount of bass lines I've lost over the years because I haven't actually written them down has probably been staggering. And a lot of the early stuff that I wrote, none of that was written down. I think there was one track that was recorded, and I think that would have been about 86 or 87, and that was probably the earliest thing that was done. That was maybe one of the original tracks that was, or one of the original bass lines that was recorded back then. But all that stuff, if only I still had it now.
Yeah.
But as I say, I mean, there was no manual with the machine. And obviously, then when I started, there was no term in '84. There was no term for like acid house.
No.
So as far as I was concerned, I knew nothing about like obviously anything like that. It was just a machine. I never even had a drum machine to go with. It was just a solo bass line. And it would have been quite a few years later, I think. Sometime, I mean, I had a 606, and I have no idea where that came from. Just like I can remember where the 303 came from, but most of the other the 808 and stuff. I mean, it's that long ago. I can't even remember like where these, especially in Stirling at that time. It's like, what the fuck? How was one of these machines ended up in Stirling, considering there was only 10,000 allegedly made? You know?
Wow, yeah.
And
Did you ever get to the bottom of that? You still have no idea how that ended up there or anything? Wow.
No, I mean, I'm not in touch with the guy that originally had it. I mean, I ended up having three 303s, and had one stolen off a stage in a gig in Glasgow one night, mid '90s.
Wow.
I got another one in Edinburgh that was actually broken. The circuit board just needed soldering and pieced together, and it worked as brand new. And that happened to be the one that got stolen off the stage at a gig in Glasgow. Must have been '95 or '96. And I think somebody just stole it because it was a piece of equipment to steal. I don't think they would had the brains to think, this is a 303, I'm going to get money like for this. So
it was there, they wanted to take it, or they wanted, it was there for the taking in that way. It wasn't nailed down.
I think it was easy just to kind of lean across the stage, because I used to have a guy that came about with me to kind of help, like roadie and stuff, and he wasn't there this night, and then went back to the dressing room to kind of just settle the brain. So I comes back out to kind of clear all the gear away, and by this time there was fucking like loads of gear. And there was this gap. There was two 303s and a 101, or 707, sorry, and then stuff on the bottom, and there was a gap in the middle. And I was kind of looking about, and I was going, right, okay, it's like you've had your fun. The joke's no funny anymore. And then I realised it wasn't coming back. And I could just feel this this desperate. I mean, it was like losing a child almost. It was that hellish, and it wasn't a good feeling, I must admit, because I knew what the machine was, but I'm pretty sure whoever it was that took it just saw it as a piece of equipment to potentially sell.
Yeah. So you would have lost your bass lines, or did you have them backed up by that stage?
No, there was no such thing as like backup. I doubt if those bass lines would have been like written down. Plus, I mean, I think a lot of bass lines they're all. I mean, you can produce bass lines like standing on your head. So it's not like it's like, well, that one's gone, so I'll just get another one.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, I used to write some patterns down, but I mean, why I never wrote them all down? Because bearing in mind, obviously, when the batteries go in the 303, then the patterns go, and that, I think, obviously that's where the original fucked up acid bass lines went, or how they came about, because it wasn't just a straight bass line, and it was a good way of writing bass lines. Just take the batteries out the machine, and you've got 30 or 40 odd like new patterns that you didn't even write. The machine wrote them for you, you know.
Oh wow,
Um,
wow.
but the like with all these clones these days, because they've got different circuits, they're actually keeping the memory. So even if you've not got the power, it keeps everything, keeps all the patterns in there. But the old bassline was good for just taking the batteries out and refreshing like the patterns. But you should just, of course, always write your bass lines down if you can have any other means of saving them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like the modern kind of thing of backing up, really, I guess, in that type of way. But let's go back to your kind of journey, because I think the real breakthrough for you, when you did actually realize a kind of the larger picture that was going on, was when you got signed. It was no, it was, you were with Finny Tribe, weren't you? And then ended up going to Belgium, and I think you got signed by Belgian label, and Belgian hardcore and Belgian techno plays such a strong role in its influence in
Mm.
a lot of UK fusion, especially within, you can feel the influence of it in drum and bass and jungle and everything really. But you had to come from out of Stirling into Europe to get signed eventually, to get noticed by kind of a Scottish label, Soma, really, didn't you? You kind of, like it was what you did on a Belgian label, which then made people realize what you were doing and start working with you in the UK. I mean, that's probably quite a crude summary there, but I think that's kind of the twist of how things went for you during that time in your career, right?
Well, I'd moved from Stirling to live in Edinburgh, and obviously got kind of. Well, I'd known the Finny tribe since the guys in the Finny tribe since about '85, because I think I'd played some really early gigs in Edinburgh, and I met them because there was a lot of kind of visual stuff went on with Egebamyasi in the early days. They got me to support them with a few things, because the Finny tribe were quite visual, completely different music, but quite a kind of visual thing that they did with the bodies and like whatever. So I basically I ended up like getting on with them pretty good, and the kind of did stuff off and on through the '80s. Went to like Holland, and mainly Holland and Germany with them early '90s, because I used to do their merchandising. And apart from doing the merchandising, me and somebody else used to, because I had another guy that played with me at that time. We were the support band. So the other guy, Fred, was their
Right.
sound engineer. I was the merchandising person, and then obviously I was the support band as well.
Right.
So we played in, it was a gig at the Milky Way in Amsterdam, and that's when I had been approached from the guys from Groove Kissing, which turned out to be two guys from a Dutch band called Sequential, who I think were quite a kind of ravey band. But the label was Belgian, but everything was actually done in Amsterdam.
Right. Okay.
And there was a kind of new beat Belgian scene, whatever that was. And so they said to send them a tape. So I came back to Edinburgh and did 3 or 4 songs, and I must admit the tape was a bunch of shite. It was, I mean, I can't actually believe that I sent them the tape and then they still went for it, because I've made much better demos and nothing's ever happened. And for some
Oh.
reason they got this stuff, and whatever it was they heard, they must have liked, and it just kind of took off from there. So maybe somebody else hearing the stuff might have seen it different.
Right. But the release that eventually came out on Groove Kissing, that definitely couldn't be described as a bag of shite. So you must have done something afterwards. So that after that tape, then you actually recorded other tracks for them. Or is that how you feel about that release on that label?
Aye, well, I think the first one, EBY EP, I think,
Yeah.
was a bit dated. I didn't think there's a couple of good things on it, but and the stuff that they heard, obviously, it was improved and made better in the studio. Didn't they just kind of reproduce it, like kind of like note for note? But it was always going to be better. I suppose upgraded, like done with better gear. But I think that particular EP wasn't it. I didn't think it was that good. Good for me, in as much as it got people to kind of like hear the name and stuff. But I just think if when you hear that, obviously, I suppose it's the same for everybody in a lot of ways, that you do some stuff, and as you kind of get more experience and you like learn stuff, things get better.
Yeah.
For me, the only good thing about that was it got the name in Europe a bit more put about. But I think the ones that came after that, the Acid Indigestion 1 and 2, I think they were a lot more kind of representative of what was happening then and what was going to happen in the future. But I think those two really kind of blew the first one out of the water, I think.
Right.
And it kind of, because I went to Amsterdam to do that first one, and then went back and did about a year later. And I think the time that came, the music and the sounds and everything was actually better. And say Indigestion Part 1 and 2 were just left the EBY EP way behind. But as a kind of bunch of records, it certainly didn't do any harm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. What I really liked was I listened to the EBY tracks for the first time last night. So I came into them for a very fresh perspective. And I really love the clarity of them and the minimalism of them, and how, instantly I start thinking as a DJ, and it's like, if there's something about it that I think of, oh, I could play this, or how would I fit this in? And I think it relates to, when you take things down to bare bones, naked acid in that type of way, it resonates with pretty much every strand of dance music that's ever come since, because you hear these elements. This is like, it's just a very, naked acid in that type of way. I'm going to stick with that description. And I could just hear this, the honesty and the purity in that type of way, and how I could hear echoes of that in so many things that I've seen. Like I'm 47, so I think, I'm a generation after you in that type of way, a few generations maybe, but certainly I'm not a new raver in anywhere, been on this since the mid-90s, but all of the echoes, everything that I've enjoyed, that, though that type of style had such an influence, like that period in dance music, and especially coming from European labels on the UK. I really enjoyed them because of what they were, and that role that they played in the development of everything that we've had since.
Well, I must admit, any tune that I've ever done, I've basically, obviously, well, first of all, I've done it for myself, and once it leaves me, it's up to what other people like can do it or want to do it. But I mean, I'm not. I didn't do music particularly to fit in anywhere. I do stuff because I like it. I get the opportunity to record it, and I mean, without sounding like big-headed, I'm not making music for DJs. I'm just making music that hopefully something's going to get played, but I don't write and record stuff with the view of it fitting in to what anybody's doing. And to be honest, it's good if it gets played, but if it doesn't get played, I couldn't give a toss. That's because basically I've done it, and then it's up to I've got no say whether people like play it or what they do with it. If they play it, fine. But as I say, I don't. We've kind of had wee discussions. We've had this in the studio about doing stuff that kind of fits in and helps stuff move along. And I just think I'm not giving a fuck about whether it fits in or doesn't fit in. Either somebody will play it or they'll no play it. And I think,
Yeah.
and that's it's, I suppose it's how people can. I mean, I don't even think about like, is this going to work for people or no? I just do something that sounds all right and hopefully get the chance to record it, and
I
just
think that's great.
hopefully I'll
And
play it.
I think, sorry to speak over you and cut in, because I think that's so refreshing to hear. And I think everybody, younger people, especially everybody's like incredibly influenced and affected by the internet and social media and all of that. And especially a lot of younger producers are constantly worried about things fitting in. Like it's what I fight against with my brand. One more thing that's like, you don't have to fit in, like you don't have to worry. And I think that's so like the pure expression of a musician should never be about how people relate to it or whether they accept it or not. It's about whether you're expressing yourself honestly or not, and whether you're satisfying yourself creatively. And I think it's really important for people to hear that. It's just like, it shouldn't matter. Don't think about where it's going to fit in or how people are going to relate to it or whether people are going to like it or what people's opinions are, because you can't control that anyway. It has to be about you, doesn't it? And your own creation and your enjoyment from it.
Well, I think if the DJs have got any skill, they can fit any record in.
Yeah.
Whether it's, I mean, can I just say, I'm not a DJ, right? I've never had any ambition to be a DJ. I wouldn't know where to start with CDJs. It doesn't interest me at all as far as that goes. I have played vinyl on records on decks before, but I didn't DJ the way that normal DJs. I didn't beat match. If I've done anything, as far as the DJ thing goes, I'd be playing one tune and I'd be letting the tune finish. Then I'd be starting the next tune. I wouldn't be matching like beats or
Right.
whatever's happening, because I would just be, I'd be DJing the way that I play live. I'd have a different kind of concept to the way that the set would flow, and it might maybe not work with people, but plus I've not got any desire to be a DJ. But if that's the way that I would have done it, or I have done it in the past, it's not a kind of conventional setup.
Yeah.
But as far as just to kind of go back to the tunes, as I say, just a case. I mean, I'm not thinking that far ahead regarding recording stuff and it being played live like somewhere. I mean, it's beyond a buzz when somebody tells you, "Oh, we heard this tune," or it got played, and it's amazing to hear something that loud, because you never get the opportunity to hear
Yeah.
tunes that you've written that loud, and that's a buzz. But to be honest, I can't mind the last time I was anywhere when anybody played anything. But so what? Who cares?
Wow. You can't remember the last time. Well, I would very much like to play some of this in my future DJ sets. That's interesting. When was the last time you performed? I mean, you get to hear it when you're performing and stuff like that. You're still
Well,
active performing.
from a performance point of view, I'm sorry, I was meaning more from maybe being somewhere when there was DJing like happening. Somebody happened to play.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've been sent videos of stuff that got played, but I've no. I mean, I remember being in the Barrowlands one night and the acid indigestion part two bubble came on, and I mean, hearing it that loud with a couple of thousand people in there was just like an experience. So it's good to kind of hear stuff like loud and just find out how it sounds. But there's probably there's no a lot of my records going about for people to play. They're all like quite rare and probably fairly battered by now anyway. So there'll be loads of scratches on them if anybody has got, and unless there's some of the latest ones off the Foxbam. But a lot of the original stuff that was done on Groove Kissing, I mean, whoever's got these records, they'll be fairly battered by now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was listening to them digitally. Let's talk about Foxbam and come closer to where we're at the moment. Tell me about how that came about and tell me about Foxtrot. I'm ignorant about Foxtrot, and I couldn't find a huge amount about him. But how did you guys link? And I think there's a nice kind of symmetry between the two of you in terms of, I mean, there's something that you said, I believe it's on your bio on the website, where he brings in the fresh energy, and you're kind of bringing in more of a kind of, your own perspective there. But the pair of you complement each other, I think, don't you?
Aye, well, I met Foxy at a private party 2014 because I stayed in Tunbridge Wells like for a few years, and I had to come because of the Scottish independence vote. I wasn't able to vote because obviously I was staying in England, but I felt that I needed to be in Scotland when the vote was happening, and it was a crushing when it didn't go the way that it should have went. And so I'd kind of met Foxy at a free party just outside like Inverness, and we just kind of just sort of just hit it off kind of straight away. But I mean, it must have been a few years before we kind of got anything serious happening. I mean, we're quite fairly well. I think we're really different musically because what he's into is completely different, like to what I'm into. And I think as far as the label goes, that was one of the good things in that. It's he's coming from a kind of harder like techno background, and all the people that he's kind of brought along. I mean, with all due respect to them, I've never heard like of like any of these guys. But as I say, that's no slight on them. That's just because I didn't follow like the scene and what's happening, and like people saying to me, have you heard this record? Have you heard that label? Stuff like that, and I'll go, no, because I didn't buy records. I didn't listen to dance music. I didn't. Plus, these days, I mean, obviously, you could probably go online and read stuff, but I can't be asked with stuff like that. So I say I didn't pay attention. So I say he's obviously buying records like fairly regularly, so he really knows like who's up there and stuff. And I can remember one of the first names that he mentioned to me, because I think like Foxy used to do clubs up here. He mentioned the name Ben Sims, and I just thought, doesn't mean all these names didn't mean anything to me. Because I was into my own thing. I was focusing on that, and I didn't kind of like spread much further than that. But no, we just kind of had a coming together and things worked out, and then the label was just an idea to kind of, I think he like come up with the idea as some kind of thank you to me for kind of partly helping him out. And I say that's just kind of like grown through there, and I just chanced it. I just chanced my arm with getting in touch with people that I knew that I had played with, and people that were kind of equivalent to what I was doing. And fortunately, thanks to everybody that was up for it, because what I mean, there was no money involved. It's just it was up to people to kind of have feel sorry for us to kind of like get the label going, and I appreciate everything that everybody's done for it.
Yeah. That's one particularly big difference, I think, between now and the time in which you were really kind of flourishing, at the time when the rave scene was kind of flourishing in that type of way that I think selling vinyl did previously. And you may correct me on your own personal experiences, but there was enough to pay everybody involved. So, the record stop would get its little bit of the sale of the vinyl, the artwork person, the distributor, all the way through to the artist themselves actually took, everybody kind of ate in that type of way to use.
Well, they would. Everybody else would get paid except the people that like wanted to be paid. Or,
right.
I mean, the labels no make money. There's more money like getting spent, but it's not about making money. It was about either recouping money and trying to get the money back so that the next record wasn't going to be so financially painful.
Yeah. Yeah.
But each record has kind of got better, because we're kind of, if you like, we're running before we can walk. Instead of just doing loads of kind of basic white covers, black vinyl, we're trying to make the next one probably better and quicker than it should be. And how whether it's going to make any difference to like the sales or no, but still early days as far as the label goes. It's still, there's probably not that many people like know about it at the minute. I mean, who knows how long it's got to go?
Yeah.
Just go with the flow until the flow stops.
Yeah, completely, and staying consistent. And I think the fact that you've had these exciting newer names that were new to you and newer to techno itself, but also to have like people like Mark Archer and kind of Jez Varley from LFO on there as well.
Hmm.
Like you say, kind of artists who were around about at the same time that you were, really kind of in that early '90s time. But I did read in an article, I don't know if it was the one that Ben had written on Juno or the one that's on Bandcamp, you didn't actually kind of share a stage with Jez, did you, at the time?
No, we never crossed paths, and even like with Mark and Alternate never crossed paths. It wasn't until like much later that me and Mark had kind of like met. But I mean, there was the connection with LFO because obviously the Leeds Warehouse and the tracks that they did. I mean, they were. You almost felt like you kind of knew somebody because the tune was that amazing.
Yeah.
It was just that kind of special, and it was really through somebody else that kind of like hooked me and um, hooked me and him up. It was just kind of, the memory's gone because there's loads of stuff. I mean, I can't remember how it all came about now, but I mean, I just like blagged it with Jez. And fortunately, he took the bait, which was absolutely brilliant. I mean, he could have just told me to just go and take a hike, but it just shows you how good the guy was to kind of just go, this label never heard it before, you know. And so whether it was in into directly with me in as much as any history, I don't know, like with the name, but obviously Egebamyasi and LFO completely different musically, but obviously in mindset for music and what it did to people back then, and just the being in the scene, there was a connection there. I mean, I think just because you maybe actually didn't know somebody or you haven't met them, you've got other unknown connections. Because I think like one that I felt was, I mean, I was doing stuff in Scotland, say in the early days that when I did some stuff with a guy called Gerald in the early '90s, and I thought, God, I'm up in Scotland doing this, and this guy's doing in Manchester, like doing what he's doing. But obviously, he had a kind of bigger profile because we both had the same management at one time, and the Terry Hollinsworth was the manager, and he basically he set me up with a weekend with Gerald in Manchester, and that was quite an interesting weekend. That it actually didn't go that well in some
Oh,
respects, but there was a jam done, which I had the tape, and the tape, I have no idea what happened to the tape. That got lost. And Gerald was quite difficult to work with. I suppose maybe working with this stranger from Scotland might have just noised up his head or something. I don't know, but say he was staying in the house with his girlfriend and a kid at that time, and the studio was in his loft. Um, so the weekend was an amazing experience, but it could have went better. But I'm a bit pissed off that I don't know what happened to this jam that we did, because the tape was the tape would have been kind of priceless now, wherever it is, lying somewhere. Somewhere somebody's got it anyway.
that's a shame. That's a real shame. And that's really
Uh,
interesting. And I think it's something, you kind of Right, there's something that guy called Gerald has said to me in an interview. It was actually we were doing an interview for somebody's book, Ray Keith, the jungle pioneer, and he really wanted to interview a guy called Gerald because a guy called Gerald was making jungle up in Manchester, not really realizing it was disconnected from everything else that was going on in London. And when we talked about it in the interview, Gerald phrased it in a way that it was going to happen anyway. The way that humankind was going, the way that boundaries were being broken between black and white people, the way that we were inspiring each other, the way that a lot of black sound system music was coming over to the UK, jungle was going to happen. And lots of different people felt that and were making it in their own way, unrelated, because you didn't know what was going on in other places as much as you do because of the internet now. A bit like how the camera was invented in two different sides of the world at the round about the same time by two different people completely because civilization was going to that point in general. And Gerald kind of felt that that was the way that the music was going anyway, and he was a conduit for that in his own way. Do you relate to that in your way, being as you've been a man on your own, you've been a lone operator, not really paying that much attention to other stuff that's going on, you're making your own art? Does that have a resonance to you in that type of way that you were kind of, you're playing around with the 303 and doing what you were doing when, other pockets in the world were kind of leading to this point as well? Does that seems to have a bit of a kind of significance to me, I think, in a way that you were you were part of one of these lone soldiers just doing your own thing because that was the way that kind of you were part of this kind of movement, really, this kind of cultural movement without realizing.
Well, I mean, as I say, when I had the 303, it was just the sound kind of took over me for quite a few years, and just to kind of pick up the thing with it, like with Gerald in the jungle. From what I can pick up, that's the way that things have evolved for him from like doing acid, like to
Yes.
begin with. I mean, I don't know how much acid he's doing now, but most of the music that I've heard that Gerald does is fucking shit hot. I mean, it's that album, that automatic or automatic, was a brilliant album. Amazing sounds in it, and there might have been stuff in there that was a kind of forerunner like into the jungle for him. But I mean, with him moving from acid into jungles, it's almost like the same kind of thing, like for myself, but it's taken a bit longer to go from the acid, like into like a bit of the dubstep, which just came again. That was another like accident.
Tell me
But
about that, because that sounds like a really new, recent discovery for you. Like in terms of like yeah, in the 40 years, this is all relatively recent, isn't it? In terms of finding dubstep or it finding you, maybe.
well, I think maybe a combination of both. But I think they say you've just mentioned the 40 years. I mean, I've been doing the acid that long that I think I've kind of earned the right to try something different.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
obviously, like kind of getting the head round the workings of Ableton and some of the plugins kind of helped to kind of create like some of it's easier to create the bass lines. Although in saying that, I mean, it came to mind that I'd had this keyboard. It was a Korg keyboard of some kind back in '84, and it was actually producing like wobbles on this keyboard. But because, or I'm saying that now you know them as wobbles because of the sound that's been
Yeah.
the kind of sound that's been created now. But having the wobbles back in '84 just wasn't what I was interested in. That's not what the keyboard was got for. So you kind of almost. I wasn't a futurist to realise that this is going to come back in about another 20 years, whatever. So as far as the Ableton, kind of got enough out of that to kind of like make sounds with the operator and other synths that's in there, and just like getting some like loops and just using some of them, and then just creating some of your own, and kind of a mixture of just finding other loops and just kind of piecing it together, listening to other stuff that you've heard, obviously on YouTube, been kind of influenced and inspired by that, and then that's really how Although I see what I've been doing is actually more wobble step than dubstep.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I was in Belgium when I first heard the term dubstep, and it didn't seem to be a genre that, and this would have been again mid 2000s. It didn't seem to have like a reputation. I never paid any attention to it. I didn't know what it was, but I mean, if I was going to categorise it now, to me, there's two forms of dubstep. There's the really horrible, screeching, vocally painful stuff. That's just, I mean, how anybody you could listen to 10 minutes of that, let alone a whole night. And then there's the more like dubstep, you know, if you like kind of Casper and Benga and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
and I mean, I'm listening to the YouTube, and I'm looking at the age of the videos, and they're like, you know, 10, 14, 15 years. And I'm going, I mean, I just assumed it was like, just done like the other day. Didn't realise that these guys had been going as long as what the the amount of years like on the YouTube videos. And again, that just comes back to, because I pick stuff up. You hear stuff by accident.
Yeah.
And a bit like the sound of the 303, there was just something about the kind of proper dub step that just, I don't know, it just kind of hit me, and it just kind of felt like getting involved in it. Because I can remember going back later, earlier than the mid 80s. You're talking about going back to the late 70s, when we in Stirling, when we were all like much younger, getting stoned, we were listening to like reggae music, like King Tubby, also Lee Scratch Perry, all these original dub albums. And I'm assuming that all these young guys that are producing dubstep, I don't know, but I'm just going by what I'm imagining. All these young guys that are producing dubstep, that maybe their dads or their grandfathers have listened to this original, like heavy duty, like dread dubstep, like dub stuff, and they've kind of brought it forward and mixed it with the much newer sounds today, but kept the kind of the old dub, and made kind of like modern sounds out of it. Because to me, as I say, I just prefer like the dub and the step rather than the dubstep.
Yeah, definitely. There was also a huge influence of garage in there when it came about in the early 2000s. Horsepower Productions, LB, Temper and things like that.
Right.
Which is the original kind of the dubstep that we're talking about, not the screechy stuff, which a lot of people will associate with America. And just to keep it simplified, that's the screechy side. Is generally, that's a term within dubstep is called bro step, and that's for the type that the stuff that you don't like. And on a personal note, neither do I really. I don't like the screechy stuff either. But I think there was a lot of influence, just as there was with jungle. It was a lot of the, what can I sample from my mum and dad's record collection? What did I grow up with? And then the influence of what was going on in music at the time, which was garage, and taking out some of those beats to create a half beat. Something that dub has always done for me, and dubstep and that kind of traditional sound, is that kind of, because it goes on the half tempo, so it's very slow. It's almost like a heartbeat, a resting heartbeat. It's the backbone. When you get really into it and you get lost inside this music, you realize there's the backbone of so much stuff, I think. And it's similar in a way to how acid is also a backbone. It's like a stream that runs through every musical movement. But is that something that kind of hit you? It's just like, it's almost like a maternal kind of feeling that relates to so many other music. Dub is like, it's the fucking permafrost in a way to so much music that exists anyway, especially anything relating to sound systems and that kind of bass weight, really, and the delivery of those frequencies.
I think acid has had a lot less, whereas I think with jungle and like dubstep, you might be sampling like drum loops or whatever. Well, certainly with like jungle and drum and bass. I mean, I think the dubstep drums are so fucking simple. It's just boom, crack, boom, bang. You're not really wanting. You're almost better just writing your own dubstep drums. There's nothing particularly special, but obviously for jungle and all the stuff that these guys way back in the days that were obviously making with Atari STs. I mean, that's just, some amount of work that must go into that. But to me, I mean, like acid, I mean, there's no, I mean, I wasn't sampling. The only samples I would have used would have been vocal samples, but all the drums and everything was all just written from scratch. So there was plus I never had a record player like back then. I wouldn't have known. You know, it was a lot more primitive to sample stuff away back in the early 90s. Now you've got like loads of sample packs, and it's probably a lot easier to kind of like get beats, whereas back in the day you had to make your own beats, and now you didn't have to make them. You can just go and like find them and they're there, which is fine if, but it's good to kind of mix stuff up a bit as well.
Oh, massively. I mean, when you're just picking up kind of samples from sample packs, though, I think there's always a danger of just making everything incredibly generic and things sounding like each other, really. And the beauty of samples is that people have gone out on their own hunting missions and found their own thing to bring back, their own thing which resonates with them, rather than just picking something off the shelf in that type of way. But I mean, you've highlighted something that I think is something that electronic music has lost something special about it, because there are these ready-made sample packs available. And I was wondering what your take on, kind of how things have progressed, especially like, kind of getting to grips with Ableton and stuff like that. What is your take on modern capabilities and the modern tools that have come about since you've been on this journey, really, and how things, whether it's, kind of a benefit or a drawback to the purity? I don't know, that word seems far too lofty, but to the actual art, really.
Well, I think CDJs, for example, I mean, I wouldn't know where to start apart from switching it on, but I think in one way CDJs has been the worst thing that's happened to DJing. And in another way it's actually pretty good, because it just means you can turn up with a USB stick and you didn't have to take all that vinyl. But I think it's almost like it's hard to say whether it's fully good or it's fully bad. It's a bit bad and it's a bit good. I think proper say DJ skill like is probably in like playing vinyl, and probably going to get shouted at now by loads of people. I'm pretty sure there is a skill to CD, like playing CDJs or whatever. But as far as the say any 303 clones, I mean, yeah, I think Roland. It's good that say younger guys or lassies or whatever that can't afford the vintage stuff can now buy a lot of the Behringer or the Roland stuff, but it's kind of saturated. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I went off acid, because it's just like it's just too kind of there's almost too much of it going about now. It's kind of lost. It's lost the original underground uniqueness and the mystique, because there's just too many people doing it, because they've got more access to the machines, which is pretty good. I'm not saying that like people shouldn't be like have access to stuff like this, but I just think it's a good thing that it's happened. But the consequence of all these cheaper machines is that just everybody and everybody's like at it now, and that's what kind of turned me off to the sound. Just because there's just like too much of it. So I think plus the other thing that I say, I'm when I started off, it went from a kind of small setup to a mountain of gear, and now all that gear has disappeared into one bass line and the Roland TAS. So instead of having 5 or 6 drum machines, it's all been condensed into the one drum machine. So it's meant that you can just turn up to a gig in a car now rather than a van.
Yeah.
So and then you can take it even further by like getting all that stuff like into the Ableton. The Ableton. The brilliant thing about the Ableton compared to the hardware is the Ableton's like a lot more dynamic. Because I can get the samples even more in time with the music now, whereas if I'm playing the hardware, I used to start off with it was a cassette machine that just played the samples, and obviously that was out of time with the drums and the bass, but it was out of time, then it came back in time, and it worked out, and it just worked out fine. Then I went on to a CD that was playing the samples, but that was still out of time. And I used to kind of play the 303 in the drums. I mean, if I was playing, for example, the Motorhead, the Ace of Spades, I would try to think of where like Lemmy's singing and the bits coming up with a cappella, and I would just try to time the break with the drums to come in when he wasn't singing, and just so that basically I'm writing the tune, like he's basically singing on top of what I'm playing. So that was slightly more in time, but it was still out of time because it wasn't, the CD wasn't synced to the machines. Then obviously taking it further, it works perfectly like with the Ableton, because you can move all the markers about and like get it in time and stretch stuff so that everything actually sounds like it's a lot more in time.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it does to my ears. I'm not saying it does. Some people might listen to it, and that's still not right. But as I say, to be honest, I couldn't give a fuck. You know what I mean? I just do things my way, and whatever happens live, that's just the way it turns out. Because you're rehearsing in the house, and everything sounds perfect, or you're rehearsing in a studio, everything sounds perfect. Then you take it live, and stuff happens, and it just doesn't work out the way you hoped it would. But that's probably a problem that like every musician's got, because obviously with the lights, the music. I mean, I didn't take drugs anymore, so because I'm on that much a high playing naturally, that I just couldn't imagine how it would go. So how the fuck I managed to get through it in the past?
It sounds like you did, though. Did you? Or did you always keep it? Were the fun side was that side of raving culture something that you enjoyed after your performance?
No, I was fairly out my box when I was playing like live. Not completely. I mean, because I had a responsibility. I mean, I've always had the professional attitude in that you've got a responsibility to kind of to the people that you're playing for, that you're going to be able to play and no make an ass of yourself. You know.
Yeah.
And I was never ever that out my box, that I didn't know where I was. There was a couple of times on E where I probably took a bit too much, and it was like it was brilliant, right? But it was probably just too much to be kind of, when you've got all that kind of lights and buttons and stuff to kind of pay attention to.
Yeah.
But I've never not been able to play, never not knowing what I was doing.
If you could go back, so any performance that you've ever done and relive that because it was special, it might have been, you're saying like some things don't go the way you expect. Sometimes they go way better than you expect. There's a happy accident, something's happened, strange coincidental timings, or just something. Can you think of a gig that stands out in that type of way, where you walked away, whether you were enhanced or not, and just thought, fuck, there's nothing compares to that?
Aye, but that's been rare. Because most gigs you come off the stage going, that sound was shit.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not that really much of a like a perfectionist, but I'm probably a perfectionist before I start, and just make sure that, like, everything's all right. But the majority of the time that you can't hear it very well, and it's just the sound is just like, I mean, to me, the better you can hear the sound, the better the performance is. And if you can't hear the sound that well, it kind of affects like what you're playing. And probably the majority of the gigs, not that enjoyable sound wise, enjoyable like crowd wise and maybe drugs wise and stuff like that. But I mean, I'm up there playing and kind of enjoying it in a totally different stressful way to what the crowd are, because they're just there and sort of like just going for it. But I'm like like with modern technology, you're at the mercy of the electricity getting switched off. You've just got to keep your fingers crossed that the machines behave and like didn't break down, and they used to break down like regularly, like you know, in the 80s, and you didn't have a clue why they broke down. And I can actually remember one gig, and it was at Pure in Edinburgh, and it was one of the few nights where everything just fell into place. The sound was good, the crowd was good, the drugs were good, the lights were good. Just the whole thing just couldn't have been any better. And then the mixing desk fucked up.
Oh no!
And I must have been about maybe 15 minutes into an hour set, and this desk like kept making a noise. It was a Roland M16 like rack mounted thing, and it kept cutting out. And I kind of persevered, and then I just thought I can't go on any longer. This was doing my fucking nutting. But and I was so and so into the zone, and it was like hitting a wall head on in a car or something. It was just like so brilliant, and then nothing, because obviously we had to stop, and that was that. Fortunately, that's not happened like very often, but that was too sudden an end to the way you would want a gig to end. But there was another night in Glasgow, a place called the Industria in '93 that started off. I remember it started off a bit ropey, but by the end of the gig, again, it was just again just the sound and everything was just amazing. And that was just be using like the 808, 909, 303, and the 101, just all live there, just jamming away. But I think to have a spectacular night is for me has been rare, and the amount that you can remember plenty of shit gigs sound wise, not necessarily everything else wise, but obviously the sound is really important. And I think, I mean, what's made it slightly better is that people after it would say, "Oh, it sounded really good. It was really good at the front." And I thought, right, well, I'm not happy, but if the bottom line is, if it sounded really good at the front, then I'll take that as being acceptable because it didn't sound good on the stage.
Yeah.
And I think if that does affect like the performance. Plus, at the same, I mean, I'm not, you know, I've never been a showman. I'm not a jumper, a booter, or I'm just too shy to be kind of like, look at me, Ken. It's just a case of let's listen to the music, and that's it. I'm doing nothing to be anybody to kind of like you know, be attracted like to the stage. It's all about the music. It's no about me as a person. No.
Yeah, definitely. Besides, perhaps, you know, certainly back then, you know, kind of earlier parties, seeing someone with so many machines and getting them all, you know, that performance like that, like you said, like you're managing these things, like there's a lot going on the stage, and I think that would be the thing that would interest me as a viewer, just to watch a man, you know, kind of making this magic from these machines, which are quite rigid. You know, they can't, you know, they like you say, with things being out of time, like it's not easy getting this particular orchestra ensemble of machines to sing live with all of the other kind of things. So I think that's why I would personally be watching, rather than wanting to see a DJ or, you know, a performer leaping around in that type.
Well,
of way.
I think this is where like your boiler sets that are quite good to a certain extent, because there has been plenty of gigs that I've done with it all set up where people were like kind of like all round about you, and there was obviously, you know, you can see people like going, "What the fuck is going on here?" Because of what there was, obviously a lot of them had never seen like the machines like before, and it was, and I mean, I'd rather play in that setup with people like all round about you, rather than sort of be up on a stage where people just can't really see much. I mean, maybe they're no bothered. I mean, I don't know, but I think there's more a bit of fascination for maybe either people who are into equipment and they can see what's what. And I suppose back in the early days, people wouldn't have had a clue, what kind of machines was producing this sound.
Yeah.
And the kind of rigidness thing. This is where the T8 machine was like transformed everything, because with the 808 and the 909, once it's playing, you can't write anything. You
Yeah.
can't. It's the pattern. It's rigid. You can maybe like mute some of the sounds, but you can't actually write the patterns when it's playing, unless it's in pattern write mode. But then if it's in pattern write mode, you can't write drum rolls along with patterns. You could put wee bits
Right.
of bass drums or something in, but you're not going to get the kind of, let's say, drum rolls that you've got if you've got extra patterns to have drum rolls in. But the T8 transformed everything, because you could actually write drums when you were playing live.
Wow.
And that you could obviously react to the crowd and stuff. So the T8 now, I mean, I put some basic stuff, basic drum patterns into the T8, but I didn't write any drums. I just write all the drums live, and just generally go with the flow of what's happening, like on the night. I do not waste my time by spending like months and days and weeks writing drums the way that I used to write drums with the 808 and the 909, because there's no much point in kind of wasting time like doing that now, because the T8, as I say, you can get all your own drum sounds into it. You can write the drums as you're playing, so it kind of doesn't get any better than that, and that kind of takes away, as you mentioned, about the rigidness of the original like drum machines.
Yeah.
And then obviously you've got the shuffle function on some of these things, and it kind of can groove things up a wee bit as well.
And also means that anytime anybody sees you play, they are experiencing something in the moment, which will not be replayed in the same way again.
Well, I don't suppose anybody knows that the drums are actually being written as you're playing. They're obviously just going to hear drums being played. I mean, with some of the new bass lines, you can actually write bass lines live as well. But I didn't really waste my time with that. I would, the bass lines I would write in the house, and they would all be done days and months before.
Right.
They'd be written in the house, and they would be. They wouldn't be changed other than with, like, changing the frequencies, but the drums. Because the thing is, I mean, I'm not a drummer. Didn't come from a drumming background. All that stuff was just learned stuff about like beats and triplets and sixteenths and all that kind of. I mean, it was like, what the fuck, you know what I mean? It's just, I mean, I knew nothing about any drumming background. You just learned how to kind of boom, 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 crack. Just keep the thing going. I mean, if you can't work a drum machine, then you don't need to be a drummer to kind of work a drum machine. And I don't know how much a drummer would be better at a drum machine, if you see what I mean, because he is a drummer, and whether knowing drumming can make you better with a drum machine, I don't know.
That's an interesting one, because they have a
Did you work
particular
like
skill
that?
in terms of the like independence of arms, and that what they can do physically with drums, and they'd have an understanding of rhythm and breaking it down. But the actual interface and engaging with a drum machine, probably not much different to somebody who doesn't know drumming really, and probably somebody who's got more interaction or experience using electronic machines. Music machines would probably have an edge over a real drummer in that type of way, I think.
Well, I mean, I like garage drums, right? But I'm just no use at writing stuff like that, because I think that there's actually probably some of the best like drum tracks I think are garage drums, because a lot of techno, a lot of acid, and a lot of stuff like that, it's just all mindless. It's just all mindless. Boom, boom. This straight 4x4 with the snare coming in, and I'm not saying that's particularly a good thing, but it's just mindless, and it's just uninteresting, and it's just a bit boring. Whereas your garage drums, and even your your dubstep drums, they've just got a better groove. And if
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a dancer, right? I never have been. But as I've said to people, that the garage music is and the drums, it almost makes me want to dance, because there's no better drum grooves than a lot of the garage stuff, and it's just the music is it's just so sexy, it's unreal.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, definitely. And I think the space in it allows for a lot of variation and a lot of, there's a lot of space. So each track can sound very different, even if it's based on a similar two-step, and the ability to have a shuffle in there, or take it off the grid a little bit and give it a little swing. But I think there's more room for variation because of the space. I don't know if you
well,
agree with that.
I think so, especially if I mean, I've got a sub bass speaker that I've got in the car, and I play a lot of like jungle and dubstep on that. And because there is more space between the bass drums, you can get the low boom coming in. It sounds amazing. But anytime I have played anything that's 4x4, it's kind of too much. Um, Plus, I think a lot of techno, and even bits of acid in some ways, doesn't the lower sub doesn't really suit that type of music, in my opinion. I mean, any time I've used like a sub with acid, I've transposed I turn the tuning right up on the 303, and then transpose it up again, so it's quite a few octaves higher, so that when the low sub comes in, you can actually hear it properly, rather
Right.
than 'cause with the 303 being tuned normally, and depending how you're tuning the knobs, there's a lot of the sounds get lost. And I just think the sub would be getting lost with a lot of the like the acidy sounds. But there's just I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it is, but just that sound that with much more space and more of a groove. And that's the kind of way that I'm like going lately, rather than a straight like 4x4.
Yeah.
It just sounds a bit dull,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
definitely, definitely. So it sounds like you're a real transitional point with your own kind of sound and your own experimentation and your own creations, really. It sounds like different things are pressing buttons for you at the moment, really, and inspiring you, and you're switching you on in that way.
Well, if people listen to what I've done from way back to now, the music's no like there's all the records that have been made. They've no all been like acid
No,
music. There's been things like Remon and Kronk and other tunes that were nothing to do with acid. So I mean, I've although it might seem like I'm like transforming into like dubstep at the minute. That is right, but there's been, if you listen to all the music, it's been varied from going back to the early 90s.
yeah, you've been
No,
on
it's
an evolution all of the time. You've always kept things fresh, but at the moment, then it's dubstep. That's all that kind of bassy stuff that's inspiring you or moving you or motivating you at the moment.
well, I've also got apart from the dubstep, I've got put a jungle set together that's obviously been more put together through like out and out samples rather than anything that I've done. Other than bits that I've added in and bass lines and stuff. But like the jungle drums are, I've just been taking them for. I mean, the thing is, I mean, I'll take anything from anywhere that I can get my hands on to further what I need to do.
Yeah.
And that's even going back to like sampling way back in the kind of late 80s. Just something that I've always done. I've always somebody might look at it as like stealing other people's stuff, but do I care? You know, once it's in the public domain, as far as I'm concerned, it's fair game. And if anybody wants to come after me for using it, then well, I'm here. Just let's go for it. Plus, nobody. No. Plus, I'm selling that. The amount of records I'm selling are that minimal
Yeah.
that it's not going to make like much difference. I mean, there was one tune that I did '97. The tune was called 1, 2, 3, 4 Beef, and it was a kind of harder, kind of like techno acid thing, and I used a Gary Glitter sample on the start of it before, unfortunately, before all the carry on.
Yeah.
And they wanted 300 quid for this sample, and then obviously it kicked off with him with his computer, and they never got their money. They never got their money for me because they weren't going to chase me, and they were all busy doing something else. But I use a lot of stuff as a kind of false introduction to tunes that didn't really bear like any point or any relation to the actual tune. I've done it like with Motorhead and stuff, so it's a bit like this tune's going to play. You think, oh, here's some Motorhead coming, and then all of a sudden it crashes into like a bit of pumping acid or something like that. So I mean, I'll like just use anything that I can get my hands on that I like the sounds of, that just to kind of make the set a bit more interesting.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I assume
that's your own take on DJing in a way, really, and showing your own influences and stuff, really, and kind of translating your things that you like into the final outcome, really, in that type of way, in a way that's kind of you showing your taste in, or getting people, luring people into something and tricking them almost, really, in a playful kind of in a positive, playful way.
Well, that's not the way that I would set out to do it. It was just, I mean, I can't remember how the thing came about. There must have been something that I potentially heard that, because one of the best like samples that I've used like quite a lot was the introduction to the sound of music. And obviously the thing comes in and Julie Andrews goes, "Oh, the hills are alive with the sound of," and then as soon as she says the sound of, it just comes in like with something completely different.
Yeah.
I just think it's a wee bit interesting to come up. I see this is a bit like where I suppose musicians have got to try to, if that's the way you want to do it, like come up with some ideas to make what you're doing maybe a wee bit different. Maybe not necessarily like what I'm doing is like different musically, but if you're trying to add in like samples or find say vocal samples that are a bit more interesting or something that somebody else has not used that might stand out, that's where the imagination comes in. Just like an artist has got to think of something or somebody that designs clothes and stuff, they've got to come up with some kind of visual concept that some of their competitors didn't think about, and just trying to be radically different. But as I say, I didn't actually particularly never set out to, right, I need to find some samples that nobody else is using, stuff like that. It's just all been a case of, I've heard this and go, oh, that would work, that would sound a bit interesting, like on that. And it's just been, I mean, going way back to say the late '80s. I mean, I've always used samples like on stuff because you never had a singer, so it's like the samples were almost taking the place of a singer.
Yeah.
Because obviously it was really basic with just a bass line and a drum machine. Another weird thing about like back then playing live was, because people were used to like drums and guitars and singers, and I think it took people a wee while to realise when they're seeing one or two people on a stage like with just a table, they're going, "What the fuck is going on? Where is the band?" You know what I mean? They're obviously that's different now because probably everybody's
used to it now.
Used to it now, didn't? But it was a bit weird. Again, that was another weird thing to start off that took people a wee while to realise that there's no any instruments here. Because obviously people didn't really look at drum machines and synthesizers and 303s as real instruments.
No.
Even though it's just a different kind of idea of an instrument. There's just, it's just a different. I mean, at times I've not got any patience for all that, like all these machines. I mean, I've broke plenty of machines just out of frustration, just because it just hasn't worked or something's not. No happened. It's not been the machine's fault. It's probably been as much my fault that you've not had the patience to try to learn it properly. But because I just didn't like to waste time. I like to switch something on, write something, record it, and then move on. I've got no patience for the finer elements of music,
Yeah. All the finer nuances of annoying tech when tech doesn't really want to kind of play ball with you, maybe in that way.
Well, when I had the first 303 that I had, didn't have the correct power supplies. Used to use these. I mean, I say you just didn't know anything about much then, and used some a power supply that wasn't really compatible with the 303. It was one of those ones that had 4 different adapters on it.
Oh, I know.
And there's a gig in Dundee that played one of the first gigs that did that power supply failed after a certain amount of time with the machine, and that was the gig. The gig was fucked after that because nobody knew that this was the problem until we realised that we're going to have to use proper power supplies that you use with 303. And one of the other things was that the DIN sync leads were a bit dodgy, and I remember I used to have a matchstick that was pushed into the bottom of the DIN sync lead to kind of push it up so that it connected with all the parts in the 303. And that obviously that was just a bit dodgy. And then just having to get better leads. So a lot of that kind of stuff was just like a learning curve to, you learned the hard way to, better leads, better power supplies, just better gear, better setup. Because you just had to get machines and stuff that was reliable. And I'm sure there'll be loads of people who can probably tell you a lot of the same stuff that they've had to do to get stuff to work.
Oh yeah. Little fixes, quick fixes, especially in the moment as well. If you had to do that live on stage, in 2 minutes before you start playing and things like that. And I mean, that was very that was special to analog, wasn't it? Really, I mean, when you have these issues with software and digital, that's a whole other nightmare. And you can't just use a matchstick or another, whatever you've got to hand, tape it at a different angle so it, kind of, the connection is there and stuff like that. I much prefer the analog way of fixing things where there's a bit more kind of all right, almost like A-Team style, right? Okay, shit, get some chewing gum to stick that there, or some blue tack or some tape, or, kind of botching things for the moment, just hoping that it fucking works, really, isn't it?
Right. Well, there was actually one time again at Pure when I think all the bass lines, I don't know what happened this night, but all the bass lines in the machine had disappeared. And
what? Did you realise that when you just started your performance, or was it mid-performance?
No, fortunately, it was before I went on. I think I went to do a kind of a check just before starting up, and it's I've no idea how everything was just erased. And fortunately, we're talking about writing the patterns down. Fortunately, I had a book with me that had patterns in it. So that was all right, but it's I didn't want to be spending the next 20 minutes to half an hour and filling the machine up with patterns again at that time of the night when you're just ready to go on. You've had this disaster. Now, if I'd never had the book with the patterns in it, then I don't think I would have been playing. I think the gig would have just no happened for me. So that was a bit lucky, but that was. Again, that was just at the mercy of the original 303. I mean, I've no idea why all the patterns, because the power was in, so it's not like I mean, I always kept the batteries in the machine.
Yeah.
So I mean that was just luck that I was able to fill the machine up with patterns to carry on. But it wasn't a pleasant time to have to do that.
I imagine that was very intense and stressful.
Well, they're probably. I mean, Pure was all right because it was slightly more a relaxing atmosphere, but it could have happened at a gig where it would have just been a lot even more stressful than it was.
Yeah.
So again, it was just kind of part of the learning curve of how to deal with these machines.
Definitely. Definitely. I think, like, you know, you mentioned Pure a few times, and that's like, you know, that's a legendary Scottish rave and really kind of put Edinburgh, I think, on the map in those early years. And I wanted to capture, I think it would be wrong. Yeah, well, we'll wrap up, kind of as a, you know, we're wrapping up now because we've been chatting for an hour or so. I did want to touch on your time with Soma. I mean, Soma was such an important label and again put Scotland on the map and stuff like that. And when you were with them, like, you know, they would have been signing like the Motorbase stuff and Daft Punk and stuff like that. I mean, Soma were hugely and Slam influential force within UK underground culture and techno. What was your time like on Soma? What are your memories of that part of your career?
Well, I never actually had that much contact with any of the guys for Soma, other than I did play the Arches like, a couple of times, and I think we never really had a kind of particularly like close relationship away from like the Arches. I assume that between what I was doing in Scotland at that time, they would have probably heard stuff that was happening. They must have heard like the music for somewhere, whether it was at the Arches or no. And I just actually I can't remember how it came about, but they got obviously asked like to do this like single on Soma, and it turns out that I mean that song Acid Nation, which lasted about 15 minutes, was never ever meant. How it lasted that long, I've got no idea.
All
Um,
right.
I mean, live would have been different because you kind of start it and you kind of build it up. But I just think it was it's almost like a prog rock acid house epic, because it just kind of it starts and it builds, and there's a couple of bits on it that just didn't work for me because I ended up when I was like turning some of the frequencies on the 303. There's definitely a couple of bits where I turned the knobs too much, and we just basically went with the recording because we were that far into the track. I thought, fuck it, I'm not recording this from the start again, because it was like it was a one-off. That recording was just done there and then, like in a studio in Glasgow, with good bits and bad bits, and we just like went with for their mistakes and everything, and so it wasn't meant to be a 15-minute track.
Wow.
But obviously, I'm glad to be connected and I had the name associated like with Soma, because obviously they're a kind of legendary status in the music scene, like in Scotland anyway. So you know, for that point of view, was like pretty good. And I mean, like, everybody was all right, but we just we had a kind of like coming together, like club wise playing there. But it's not like we were particularly like best buddies or like anything like that, because we didn't really. I played a few gigs with Stuart Nord and stuff, but gents, no, like there was other people that I met like more often, but it was still it was nice to be asked like to do it, and it made a bit of money out of it, so can't complain. So I always appreciate anybody that gives you the opportunity to like make some vinyl, because it doesn't happen very often,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So I know I appreciate the chance to do that.
Definitely. Who then? You know, you said there was other people who you saw a lot more of, or maybe had more of an impression or left a mark on you more. Who, in a similar way to yourself, there, you know, kind of who would you like to kind of shout out or highlight who were part of your peers or part of doing other really interesting things at that time from Scotland, who maybe have been overlooked or haven't had their flowers or kind of been celebrated quite as much in terms of, you know, making really exciting stuff and putting Scotland on the map and turning it from that backwater that you were describing at the start to somewhere that people from all over the country were looking at and going like, those guys know their fucking techno and they know how to party, and there's something special going on in that corner of the UK. There's something special going on in that country.
Well, you know something, I can't believe it or not, I can't actually think like offhand at the minute. I mean, obviously, I know people that have like dealt with it like in the past, but I can't. I mean, I can't come up with like any names, believe it or not, that have particularly blew me away. There's just it's like no, there's just so many like good people at the minute doing stuff that. But I say, I think just because I've done my own thing, I mean, with all due respect to everybody that I've met in the past, present, and future, I just didn't care. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
I just do my thing. I hear a lot of good stuff, but I don't really pay much attention to like what anybody's like else is doing.
Yeah.
And there's not really been anybody lately that's got much of an influence, and I mean that in a good. I didn't mean to be sort of like particularly bad towards anybody, but that's just the way it is.
No, you're being honest. You're being honest there. You're not just sort of pulling out names for examples because I've asked you to. You've been very honest there, and I like that. I appreciate that. More to the point, more pertinently, what are you up to? What can we hear next from you? What are you working on at the moment?
The next artist is like myself, which I've done a New Order remix of Blue Monday for this next Foxbam.
Wow.
Foxy's got a kind of harder acid thing, and the guys from Paris Minimum Syndicate have done this dark, slowish piece of like acid. So I mean, the whole idea of the label was it was a multi-genre thing. It wasn't going to be techno, it wasn't going to be dubstep, it wasn't going to be anything. It was just going to be 4 different tracks, and all the tunes that have came out so far, I think there's quite a variation. And there's other stuff in the planning, but it's too really early to mention any names, just in case it falls through, you know.
Yeah, completely. I'm really looking forward to hearing the Blue Monday remix. That sounds really interesting.
Well, I'll send you a wab of it at some point.
Yeah, that would be great. Awesome. Great. That's really cool. Mr. Eggy. What do you prefer to be called?
Jimmy's fine, or Egg, or whatever.
Brilliant. I mean, I guess the final question really is like, how do you have your eggs? Have you got a particular preference? What's your favorite way of cooking them?
Sunny side up.
Sunny side up. Interesting. I'm a poacher myself.
Well, I like most ways other than anywhere at all other than scrambled. My brain's the scrambled part, but the egg I'll just leave. You cook it and I'll eat it.
Brilliant.
One more thing.